Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Block 3 of the UEFA A licence. This part of the course is around creating the attack, linked to strategies and tactics. We're very pleased to welcome Rob Edwards, who's a specialist coach in possession for the FA, who's predominantly worked with the 20s this season, and John Griffiths, who's phase lead YDP, 15 to 17, and predominantly works with the girls under 17 national team. So welcome to them. As usual, we go back to the principles of play, which these principles will link to any invasion game. We've worked to these principles on the first two blocks, and we'll continue to do so during the course. So just take those in possession and out of possession. Obviously, we're working on the in possession ones: penetration, create space, movement, support, and creativity. They will obviously link to all your practice design and link to your games regarding your strategy to try and win the game. Just going to give you an example, live examples of the principles of play. So over to you, Matt, for the video. So as you're watching, you should a live example of the principle of play in action. And then the next slide is how the FA have then looked at how their teams and linked to the courses are going to work with the England DNA. So if you have a look at that slide, and how are some of those words and the language used linked to the principles of play? Potentially, England will work in 5 lanes, and they'll look to dominate and control the ball, playing through midfield. That may look like playing beyond. It may look like playing around. It might look like playing through. Obviously, the movements of the players may create pockets in between the lines, and potentially that may come through rotation of players. And then we talk a little bit about wide diamonds, allowing us to play through the midfield area. We're now going to give you an example of the England DNA live with some footage. So over to you again, Matt. Great. So there's an example of the England DNA live. We're now going to look at case studies linked to the 20s with Rob and John with the 17s, and then we'll just work some questions as we go through the information. Over to you, Rob.
Levo, hopefully you've got me, because I'm having a nightmare with my connection this morning, so I apologise. Hopefully I've stayed strong through this now. If we flip to the next slides, what I wanted to do first of all is talk about a game that we had in November. It was against Iceland. It was a home game. Talk a little bit around some of the preparation and what we would have showed the players in terms of a game plan, and then just how the game planned out. Take you on a little bit of a story of how the game went, some of the challenges we faced, and some of the solutions that the players found. Just wanted to bring this slide up again because this is some of the common language that we'll use throughout the age groups and the pathway when we're talking about planning sessions, thinking about sessions, talking to the players or along with the staff. So the slides that you had on there, Levo, before around, with showing the wide diamonds and whether we're playing through or around or beyond, people playing in pockets. A lot of this terminology we'll use as well. So hopefully you'll see some of this coming out in some of the clips now. So onto our case study. The first video, please, Rambo. Thank you, pal. Okay, so what we've tried to do here, because we're not able to show any footage, if I can pause it quickly before we start, and it goes on. That's it, perfect. It's just a little bit around what we saw from Iceland. So we'd seen a couple of games. It was a mixture of their 21s and 20s that were coming over for a friendly. Obviously, we can't show any of the game footage now that what we'd seen. So we've created a little bit of an animation to show you some of the possible solutions that we would talk around with the players. Very quickly, we delivered this a little bit more to the players. We didn't have much turnaround between Portugal and Iceland. So there was a recovery day, a traveling day between the games. So this game plan would have been delivered to them a little bit more. So it would be, right, lads, this is what we've seen. Here's some of the solutions that we could that might happen during the game, and obviously the players are then going to make decisions when they're out there. So a couple of them really quickly on here now. You'll see they're in that 4-5-1 mid block. The 8s tend to then jump and press, which could leave pockets of space to be able to play through and penetrate there. Or if they don't, then we maybe have to get that switch of play, and we might have to play around. Of course, there's the opportunities to play over if possible and beyond, but that might be a little bit more difficult because they're in that mid to lower block. So this would have been delivered to the players, but with actual footage against Sweden and the Republic of Ireland. I've just made an animation there so everyone can see what we're talking about. So if we go to the first video, please, Rambo, of the game. We've got some transitions in, so they're in possession at the moment. Hopefully I can stay with it and I don't lag. So if I'm talking over it now, hopefully it's at the same stage you guys watching are at. We win the ball back and they look to try and press quite quickly, but then you see how quickly they regain their shape and they get back into that 4-5-1. When the right centre back has it, Rambo, and everyone's highlighted, can you pause it, please? Lovely. So you can see there's that block. There's that what we were talking about. You can see the difficulty that we may face now, some of the challenges that we might have in terms of being able to play through and penetrate, or playing beyond or over, like we showed then in the animation. So it might be a case of being a little bit more patient and playing around, perhaps. So you'll see some of in the later clips of what we did. I think in this case now we look to try and play beyond or into or over, and it gets snuffed out, and Iceland regain possession. So that was kind of the setup. That was then Iceland in a nutshell. If we move to the next clip now, just shows another challenge that we faced, and talk a little bit around the detail and the tactics. Please, John, Levo, if you see anything, just shout up. Highlighted our number 10 there, looking to try and find space in between and in the pockets. And you can see them, their wide player and one of their 8s now just closing that space off. So we're having to be patient now and look to play through and progress. We hold that just now, and we've highlighted the difficulty then again that we might be able to playing through is because I think their 8 now doesn't jump and try and press like we've shown might happen in the animation. again, it's probably difficult to try and force that ball through because the gaps are so small and the gaps are so tight. So it might be that where the space is around. You can see there that the 5 lanes that we're attacking along now. So we have got the opportunity to go around it. In this case, again, now if we let it play again, we look to try and go through, and again, just snuffed out. So a couple of the challenges that we faced, whether we were going over or beyond, or whether we were trying to go through. If we move to the next one now, please, Rambo.
I've done that one then, just to give you a bit of a break between you talking, because it's quite a long delivery otherwise. For coaches in development, then the crucial thing to take from Rob is that this quick turn, so the players have to be types of interventions. So he's done quite a lot of demand on this turnaround between the game because of the shorts of time. The next were more an ownership, guided discovery, questioning way. So players' phase is crucial that they are doing in a variety of different ways. And then potentially in the game, we've got to make sure that they are able to cope with different strategies and tactics. So the potential for the 9 to get on the half turn on the initial video, to look to threaten the space in behind, to create space, A, to either get the ball to him, or B, to make space in the pocket's crucial. If you look on the second one, the 9 came to the ball too early, and 9 and 10 were really in the same space. So keeping it play, but the 9 needed to stretch more. Or if he's going to come to defeat the 9, then the 10 take his space, potentially. So again, keep linking the DNA slide to what's being said, to saying that here's a live example. How does that fit? Okay, Rob.
Yeah, spot on.
To you.
Thanks, Paul. So yeah, if we run the next clip now, now it's the first couple of clips we possibly, and I'm not sure because it's down to the players to make the right decisions, but possibly we look to try and go forward a little bit too early. So this clip now is a little bit longer, but as it's going now, I'll sort of just, you can see that what happens to the opposition as we stay a little bit more patient. So that control and patience that we talked about, that was on the headlines before, some of the terminology that we use. We see our number 10 now just dropping to try and get on it and be busy. Ideally now we'd want him sort of staying in between the pockets and trying to force him back. But if you look, while we are keeping the ball, we're getting more numbers on their last line. So just to draw your attention to that, keep it playing, Rambo, it's fine. And you can see then what it does to the opposition as well. And it will highlight it in a second, just as this ball comes across. So if we pause that now, that's a little bit of a different picture now to what we were seeing before. So Iceland now, you can see the far side, their number 11 is dropping into almost a left back position. Their midfield now is not as organised, so we've disorganised them more. So now there might be opportunities to play in between in those pockets, might be opportunities still to go around, might be opportunities to be able to penetrate and go in behind. So just by keeping the ball, being a little bit more patient, attacking across those 5 lanes, we might be able to disorganise the opposition and then be able to play forward from there. And all the time, we're looking to play forward and find the right time to speed that game up. So you can see now we've highlighted the numbers that are on their last line. And as the clip plays on, it's down to the players and to recognise the right opportunity to speed the game up. This time we go around them. Lovely bit of skill from the number 10. And then we're penetrating into the box. So that's one way to try and break down the challenge that we faced. Another one now that would be similar. Yeah, go on. Sorry,
Sorry, Rob. How long between games did you have to work on this?
Not long at all, John. So the Portugal game would have been 3 or 4 days before this game. So the good thing was, if we just pause this video now before we go into the next one, the good thing was that the way Portugal set up, they were 4-3-3, and quite a lot that happened during the game. Their 8s would come out and jump as well to try and get pressure on the ball. So there were similarities between both game plans, Portugal and Iceland. In terms of grass time and being able to prepare and train what we were going to come up against, not so much. Like I said, we had a recovery day, a traveling day, one day then on the grass that was very low tempo, but we probably would have walked through a little bit more stuff rather and been quite prescriptive to try and get some of the key messages across for preparation for the game. So, and I know you'll have experienced very similar things. I haven't come up. I haven't done a 3-game camp yet. So I know that would be even more of a challenge in terms of trying to get those messages across to the players and how we go about doing it. But yeah, very little time, John.
Yeah, and I guess so. You've only got that just 1 second to prepare. So how within you saying that the players have to make decisions within the context of the game, how do you plan for the fact that they need some sort of strategy to being able to execute the game plan, and the fact that they can make decisions from that as a platform? What sort of things do you do in your coaching and your training preparation?
Well, I think it'll always, as much as possible, it'll be opposed. There is decision making in the training, John. But I think what's important is that the players know, because as you well know, they're coming in from here, there, and everywhere. And we've got to try and get some key messages into the players about how we play very early on. So the beginning of the week, the beginning of the camp is really important to get a lot of those key messages in from that first meeting, where Keith will talk to the players about why they're here, and then right the way through to the first time the first time they're on that grass. So that first day where we'll have a bit of a connection day, we call it. But straight away we'll be feeding in those messages again. So I'll be talking about that sort of that in possession stuff. So looking forward and playing forward, 4 and 8 playing on the insides, and not blocking passing lanes, looking forward, playing forward the 5 lanes, and all those terms. So I think we're drip feeding that stuff in straight away. Of course, there's time for some real clarity to sort of say, look, this is the structure of the team, so that we can look like a team. But then off the back of that, if the structure's right, John, I think whatever the opposition do, we can find some space then, accordingly, wherever it's going to be. So I think if the structure's right, it's up to the players then, and obviously on the sidelines to try and help. It's down to the players then to try and find that space, whatever the opposition are doing.
Sure. And I guess you have the same sort of conundrum as we do, where you'll have the players that come in from different philosophies, different playing styles, etc. And then you'll have players that come in that have had different experiences, particularly at sort of the 20s level, where some are playing, championship first team, some are playing in the under 21s league, some are, playing limited a number of games. So you've got sort of load management, game experience management, and different playing styles. So almost managing those first few hours, days before you're preparing for games.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think that's why they do need that clarity as well, because they want to be clear. I know as a player, I felt most comfortable when I was clear on my roles and responsibilities in and out of possession before going into the game, and I think the players do want that as well. But at the same time, we want them to be able to make good decisions under different conditions as well. So that's why it's great coming up against Portugal. It might go for us and attack us and be a little bit more. In terms of out of possession, now they're high press and they'll go for us a bit more, where Iceland might sit off and get in that mid to low block, because ultimately when they do get to Gareth and Steve at that top end, hopefully they get there, they're going to have all these decisions to make, and then we want them to be able to, when they go over that line, to make those good decisions and work out what is the right thing at the right time. So we're just trying to sort of give them as many opportunities to experience that as possible. And in the short time that I've been in the FA since October, we've had some fantastic games, Italy away and Portugal away, but then very different games at home, Czech Republic at home and Iceland at home. So the lads are the players are experiencing different things all the time. Rambo, if we go to the next one, please.
Gents, on the delay, can we?
Say again.
Rob, can you hear me now? Because I think I'm on a delay. Is that coming through or not?
I'm not getting anything. Oh yeah, I've got a video playing now at the moment. Okay, so this is another turnover now where we get the ball back. And what I wanted to highlight here now is if I cast your minds back to that the bit of the animation that we showed before. So this is another way of us to break that sort of block down. Their number 8 has jumped now to get pressure on a ball. So this is an opportunity for us now to penetrate in that pocket of space that we've highlighted where our number 10 is. So the last one, we've had to control it and be more patient to be able to play around. This time the 8's jumped, we've recognised it, and we're able to play through them. Good receiving skills from the 10, and then we're into a dangerous position again. So a couple of different ways of playing around it and playing through it. What we also were able to do then, John, it was our number 10 actually found some space. If we go to the next video, please, Rambo. We highlighted before the limited space in between the pockets and through them. So he was able to find some space, obviously in a different position. So this clip now is quite a nice short one, really, really simple. You see it now highlighted. And 10 decides to find some space and make that forward run, and we can penetrate in a wider position. This was something then, upon him doing this as well, it was something that was really clear. It was something that we spoke about then at half time as well. So it was great then to see him doing it quite early in the second half. He'd recognised where the space was anyway, so it was nothing to do with us. But if you look at the showing that one again, Rambo, lovely. It's only a nice short one, isn't it? Receiving the fullback position, finds a space rather than trying to find pockets of space. Now he's penetrating and running beyond, and we're able to get behind them, but in a wider position, and again into a dangerous position. And the final clip in the second half just highlights that we were able to find. So we discussed this at half time. As I said, you see Iceland get back into that 5-4-1 shape, 4-5-1 shape. Now again. It's about finding that space, so penetrating, run. We're able to create better numbers in a wider position. And all right, the shot goes over this time now, but it just shows some of the successes that we had against this mid block. So I think at first we showed how we tried to prepare it and what we would show the players. Iceland did play how we thought they would, but there was many times like that first couple of clips that we showed where we looked to try and maybe force things a bit. That happened quite a lot, but then we showed some of the successes that the players found, some of the solutions that the players found during the game. So whether it was a jumping 8 from them and we were able to play through, or whether it was then our number 10 who we give a little bit more license to find some space because our 4 and 8 are playing on the inside, begins to find the space on the outside. And we're able to hurt them a little bit more in those areas. So that's kind of how the game went.
I guess the importance of having those central and outside runners that keep stretching the Iceland back line. It gives two opportunities. One, the potentiation of playing behind, beyond, and through. But then the second thing of if it stretches it and the picture changes is that you can play in front and find those pocket players. So making sure that players, I guess, similarly to us, are disciplined in the roles that they're being asked to do when there is a plan in place based on, two things. One, the potentiation of the player. Secondly, the DNA and how we want them to be able to play is really, really important that they're disciplined in doing that.
Yeah, spot on, John. And like I said, I think if the players are pretty clear on what they need to do, then they'll be able to make good decisions off the back of that then. So I think if we sort of just go, right, off you go and make those decisions, there might be a lot more questions. But by being able to practice it, talk about it, show them whatever it is in the build up, in the lead up to the game, I don't think there's too many things that come up then that surprise the players. So you're right. As long as the front three more often than not are stretching it, as long as 4 and 8 are then playing on the inside. For us now, what we're talking about, playing on that inside, and for many reasons, but being able to play through them, not block passing lanes, give us options to play through. They're looking forward, but also they can stop any kind of counter attack. Then our 10 can find those pockets, and whether it's wide or inside, or make those forward runs, a bit more license to find the space. And what it did, it was a different game to the game 3 days prior in Portugal, where we maybe had to sort of look over them or beyond them a little bit more because they would come out and come and press us more because they get in that block. The players had to, like I said, be a bit more patient. Maybe a couple of switches of play to disorganise the opposition, and then look to speed the game up at the right time when we had more numbers, stretching them or playing in those sort of pockets. So 2 good games. I know we haven't spoken about the Portugal game, but a really good camp for different reasons. They were 2 completely different teams and different ways that we had to come up against and try and find the answers to. Like I said, you can pick out lots of clips there. There's 7 of them there, including the animation. just gives a little bit of a story and tells a story of how we tried to plan it and what happened during the game.
That's great. Rob, can you hear me now? James,
yeah, I've got
you.
Can
you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Apologies to the ladies and gents on the call. I've had a problem with my internet. I did have a couple of questions as we went through. Hopefully that this will just be a summary. Is there ever a time, Rob, where you've said there that the wingers will go inside to create space in wide areas for fullbacks and overlap and try and overload in midfield? Is there ever a time where you send your fullbacks inside because you have a really good 1v1 winger who you want to try and isolate in 1v1 positions? Have you ever looked to play in that way?
Yeah, it's not something that we've coached a lot or worked on a lot, but there's been times, Levo, in the 4 games that I've done so far where the players have found some solutions in that way. I can think of a couple of occasions in a Czech Republic game where one of our players did it, and it was the right thing to do, because I think it was almost the case. It was because the ball started on. It was our right back. The ball had started on the left-hand side from a throw-in. He was already in that position at the moment to defend and attack, just in case we lose it. Think about the what if. But he was able to stay in there and almost overload their midfield to keep the opposition narrow and give a 1v1 to our winger on that switch of play. It's not a tactic that we talk about all the time, but even during this game, in this Iceland game, there was a couple of examples to try and get our wingers on it and play around them, where if we could narrow them up a couple of times by our wingers, by our fullbacks playing inside, to give our wide players 1v1s, certainly. We'll put that down to the players to make those decisions as well, Levo. So it's not something that we've trained loads.
Okay, and is there, again, for the coaches?
Go on.
Sorry, am I breaking up again? I think I'm on delay, aren't I?
I've got
Is that coming through now?
Yeah.
Is there ever a time where you may, so you've got 2 really strong centre forwards? Is there ever a time when you might change your formation to accommodate the fact that you've probably got 2 of your best players in the group both want to play 9? Or how would you accommodate that?
John, do you want to go? I've been speaking a lot. Do you want to go?
Yeah, just to kind of support the previous one, Rob. We did something similar in against Switzerland, but for different reasons. We didn't necessarily want to isolate with the flank player out wide. And what Switzerland would do is their 2 fullbacks would jump early, and what they would do is try and isolate your flank players. Because we've got strong flank players, they would try and, as the ball was arriving, try and either deal with the ball or get to the player first, which then left spaces inside. And one of the key things for us is using the lanes as references for the players. One, because they're true references in respect of markings on the pitch, i.e. lanes 1 and 5 are outside the penalty area, and the penalty area doesn't pretty much move no matter where you are around the world. So the references are true for the players, so that it's easy for them to pick up sort of new detail. And we've done the same, Rob, where we'd never really played fullbacks inside, but we're in an elite round of qualifying for a European finals. We've got 3 very, very tough opponents, and we needed to do things just subtly different to make our opponents think. So what we did was we allowed their fullbacks to jump out to our flank players, and we moved our fullbacks into lanes 2 and 4. So we actually had our fullbacks consistently playing inside in lanes 2 and 4. And because of the simplicity of those reference lines, it didn't need a massive amount of coaching. All we said is just try and keep 7-11 in lanes 1 and 5. And when the fullbacks are in there, just move the fullbacks up on the ball side. So, for example, if the 11 is playing out in lane 1 and the opportunity is the ball side's on the left-hand side for us, we just moved the left back up into lane 2, and they just played higher. And all of a sudden, like you say, we got massive overloads in their midfield. And again, we ended up winning that game 5-0, just because they couldn't deal with and couldn't change or didn't recognise. We played a lot of sort of stuff playing wide, that we changed a tactic and a strategy to try and not only combat what they were doing, but to try and deal with, an advantageous position for us, and the fact that they were going to leave those lanes completely exposed and we could exploit it. And then to your second question, Paul, around second question around 2 9s, Paul. Yeah, we've done that. That'll probably link into the Italy stuff that we come on to just later on in the presentation.
Okay, John, over to you then. If we want to give some examples, John, from the ladies' side of the game. And again, I do apologise for my internet being so poor at this time of day. It's obviously a very busy area in the country. So over to you, John, on your case study.
Okay, just to give some context around this before we go into the presentation. So this is for coaches. This is a real testing opportunity for anybody who gets the chance to work at this level of the game. You know, those that are working in academy football, where you're playing in the FA Youth Cup, or you're playing in leagues on a weekly basis. You know, this is the balance of preparing players for development and then continuing on a trajectory of improvement, and also, you know, having to win games to get through tournaments. You know, if we don't win games in our first qualifying rounds in Europe, the whole, you know, under-17s tournament season can be done in October, when what we're looking to strive to do is try and get to as many finals tournaments as we possibly can, because it gives players the ultimate experience in preparing them to go in and play for Gareth or for Phil as they move through their journey. So this is us having qualified for the European finals in 2018 in Lithuania. And the context of this game is this is a group stage game. It's the final group stage game against Italy. It's a World Cup year, so getting to the semi-finals is absolutely imperative to give players the opportunity to qualifying for a World Cup. We've gone 2 games, and we went out with a mountain of injuries going into game 1, and they continued into game 2, which it hampered us in the first 2 games, but actually played into our hands in the 3rd game. So we've played Poland. We drew 2-2 with Poland, and we played Spain and lost 2-1 to Spain. So we've got a point going into the last game. Italy had played Spain in the first game and drawn 0-0, and played Poland in the second game and drawn 0-0. So going into the 3rd game, they're on 2 points, we're on 1 point. They only actually need to draw the game to qualify for the semi-finals. Matt, if you just want to start playing the presentation for us. Okay, so if you look down the right-hand side, there are some numbers. So since 2015, which is over 3 European qualifying campaigns, Italy have only conceded 9 goals in 23 games, which is the minimum amount, even from the top nations, that anybody had conceded over that duration of time. For that current season, they played 8 games and conceded 3 goals. And in their last 5 games, of which it included Poland and Spain in the qualifying stages, the group stages, they conceded no goals in 5 games, including 3 games in the elite round. So in their elite rounds and finals group stages, they conceded no goals. So all of a sudden, we found ourselves in a position whereby we need to score goals because we can't afford to draw the game to go through to the semi-finals. And we're playing against probably one of the toughest defensive nations that there are to try to win the game. The other thing is that they have quite a threatening forward line. So consistently, they would have 3 to 5 players playing up against your back line. And they hold expansion really, really well with their 7-11. They've got 2 very quick wingers. And their wingers, if you look at the picture in front of you, they like to cheat and stay quite high. So that meant we had to consider what threats we would have to deal with in flank areas, but also that we would have to consider that it might be a spatial opportunity for us to exploit, in the fact that they might leave spaces in lanes 1 and 5. What we also knew about them is that aerially they were quite dominant. So just getting into lane 1 and 5 and crossing the ball would have been ridiculous for us. 1, because we hadn't got very tall players and strong headers of the ball in central areas. 2, because we got actually pace in a forward line. So actually what we tried to do mostly was play to our strengths and not worry too much about what Italy were doing. So that's the context to the scenario that we were in. We'd only got 2 days to prepare for this game, 1 day on the pitch. So we played Spain, and then we came into the game day -2 model. And on that day, we got the technical staff together with our analysts and said, right, okay, this is the conundrum. We know the statistics about how, all the statistics of they don't concede many goals. We know their back line drops off. There won't be much spacing behind. We have got quick forwards. How are we going to deal with this? And then our analysts started to talk about sort of half spaces between, started to look at where most of their supply came into their forward areas, which was their fullbacks. So we knew we had to try and stop their fullbacks playing. We knew playing up against their two central defenders would have been a waste of our time. We knew trying to play in beyond and behind potentially would have been a challenge if we played longer, because they dropped their line off. What we started to look at was their midfield. And if we thought about if we try and overload their midfield and try and play in the pockets in the half spaces between their units, we might get an opportunity to actually play between rather than beyond. And one of the key things that we did in the coaching session before is we talked very simple language in it. Go to your point, Rob, about trying to get players that can make decisions in the context of the game, but actually that the solutions to the game are endless. But we had a plan for a simple principle was actually the ball breaks the line. So instead of trying to play to feet of the two forwards, we just pushed the ball through their line, and we knew that we'd have at least two forwards running, facing forwards into their last line. And we thought that would cause the most problems because there wasn't be a lot of space in behind, but we knew we'd got enough pace that probably over the first few yards would compromise their last line. So what we did was we tried to play to the 10 in the pocket and get the 10 to split either side of their holding midfielder. And go to your point, Leaves, around we needed to get our two best forwards, our two best goal scorers, who over this season had been fairly proven and fairly consistent in scoring a lot of goals. We tried to get both those players onto the pitch. Traditionally, we would play with three forwards, one central, two flank players. But what we tried to do here was get our two best front players onto the pitch. And what we did was we worked out, if you look at the maths there, they're still numerically, they got 5 against our 3. But what we tried to do is two things. One, by pushing the two forwards between the half spaces, is we actually used 2 players to occupy 4. Because what they did was they didn't push their fullbacks on, which was most of their supply to the forwards and their flank players. Their fullback stayed tucked in. Now, some would go, well, actually, doesn't that provide you with more players? Well, actually, no, because the challenge for them is who actually picks up now the 2 9s? Is it the fullback or is it the central defenders? Actually, neither did. And it made it really challenging for them because we played in that space. And every time we pushed the ball through the last line, we had a mountain of space to be able to get our 2 9s on the pitch. And in between and get them on the ball. And then we'd always got the third runner in there, which was at least a 10, but we tried to use the side diamonds to support as well. We got expansion from the 2 fullbacks who played more in lanes 1 and 5, which slightly pinned their 7-11s back, but not to a great extent because they tried to cheat, stupidly maybe and naively on their part, because if they'd have maybe dropped their 7-11s back and more compact, that might have caused us more of a problem in trying to supply the number 10. But it also presented us with an out of possession opportunity as well, which I'll come on to as we go through. So that was the game plan, was trying to push the 2 9s between the fullback and the central defenders, get the 10 on the ball.
John, just quickly then, how different would that have been to your previous game?
John,
yeah, very different. If I'm honest, we're playing Spain in the previous game, and it's a completely different game plan because what we're trying to do is against Spain, we know we're not going to get potentially as much of the ball. We try and keep the possession as much as we possibly can, but they would risk it on a much higher line as they start to move up the pitch. They look to get numbers forwards. They're more patient in that. So in transition, that gave us more of an opportunity to play beyond and between. And around, rather than trying to play in front of a back line that was quite dropped off. So actually the game plan was completely different.
And same question that you asked me before. How much time did you have to prepare for this one? Prepare for the girls for this one?
Yeah, 2 days, and there are a plethora of things that we could do. So reviewing the footage, planting the seeds with the players in units as individuals. We announced the game. We announced the team 2 days out, So it gives us a lot more preparation time. Now, look, yeah, of course, there is a lot that can go wrong. Injuries, recoveries, all sorts of things that can happen. But we feel that if we're more open and honest with the players, we can get more information dripped into the players over those 2 days than almost announcing it on the day or the night before. It just gives us more preparation time to that. And yeah, there's always you have to deal with players that potentially aren't playing, but we've been doing that sort of all year. So it's nothing new to the players, the fact that it might be new at the start of the cycle, but by the time they get to, by this time we've played nearly 12 games. So they're 12 games in, and it's nothing new to them. So they're actually used to the team being announced early. And then we can go through footage, training, walkthroughs. So when we hit the grass, we can really maximize, 1, their recovery time, 2, their actual tempo time. So we actually try and get a good 15-minute spelling where they're operating at game pace, but they know the principles that they're operating off. And then it's little tweaks, little changes, but they're experiencing exactly what they're going to do in terms of the game plan at game pace in the session the day before the game. So yeah, it's not a lot of time, right, but actually there is more than one way to drip the information in rather than just getting on the grass.
Yeah.
I guess that's similar for you guys as well, is it?
Yeah, exactly, definitely. And as you said, you've hit them with all the different types of ways, so all the different learners are going to experience something, and hopefully they're all going to take it on board and as much as possible. You've got to maximize your time, haven't you? Especially for a qualifier when these games are so important for you as well. And
go back to your point around, clarity as a player. The players really like clarity, and giving them the opportunity to ask questions in the session live, and putting reviews in the session live is important. But also then what we did is we mic up as coaches. So any of the detail that we deliver, I mean, what the clue that lent to that was we'd film training and then we'd go back in again. This was a few years ago. And the players would come and go, okay, training's up and live. I can't remember what you said at that point. Can you just clarify for me what you were saying? And I'm saying, I can't even remember what I was saying. So how do we expect the players to? So what we did was we started to mic up so that when they're reviewing training, they've also got the detail with it as well. Because, it's really challenging. You're trying to manage 11 players, 22 players, and all the detail and everything else that's kind of going off around it. We forget stuff, and I'm pretty sure they do. Yeah. So we found that miking it up was really good because then they could go back to exactly what was said at that time and the detail, and we found that layered it better for them in terms of acquisition of knowledge.
Brilliant.
So I guess to your point, Rob, is we're trying to find as many ways as accelerating in the short amount of time that we've got, the player learning, going into the game plan based on the fact that the principles don't change. So, look forward, play forward, playing between, playing beyond, playing through, playing around, delay, they don't change at all. So the actual style and the DNA and the blueprint stuff doesn't change. But what changes definitely is the tactics and strategies that we're looking to deploy those things in as we go game to game, opponent to opponent. So it's finding ways of trying to get that information in quickly. So going back to Italy, so you can see here, look, we tried to get expansion through the fullbacks, just really to occupy their fullbacks a little bit more, so that it almost enabled us to play. If you look in the central area there, it almost enabled us to play 3 against 2 centrally against their 2 central defenders. And that worked really, really well. They'd gone from not conceding any goals in 5 games, only 3 in 8, 9 in 23. We scored 4 goals against them from exactly the principle that we tried to operate with, which is trying to play between their lines and trying to find little spaces between their fullbacks. And 3 out of the 4 goals came from exactly that. The simple principle of trying to find the balls with the central, the side diamonds and the 10, and then just pushing the ball through the line, knowing the fact that we would have 2 central runners consistently penetrating their last line. And then it was about ball speed, trying to find, quick, slow across the back so that we moved their midfield around. So the ball speed was quite quick across the back, then into the 10s or the 8s, the side diamonds, and then just a nice gentle push through the last line, knowing that we got forward runners that almost within 2 contacts were finishing.
John, who did? Sorry if you didn't hear all of that. Who were the people that were supplying? Do you think, like your number 10 and who did you find that were playing those passes more often than not?
It was mostly the central defenders, so the 5 and the 6. And what we got is the 4 to move against us, get one of their midfielders to drop onto the 4. So what we did was actually cleared the space to find a direct line into the 2 side diamonds or the 10. And again, that was just part of the build the attack strategy, where we were trying to find those central players, because it gives a very different angle of when you push a ball down the side of a central defender, from it coming centrally, from it coming to a 7-11. It was easier to cut out because of the position that they would take in almost trying to balance off and cover. When you're trying to play on an angle ball from a 7-11, it was easier for their central defenders to cut out than almost a slightly angled or a straighter pass just push down the side of them. They haven't got time to adjust or time to react. So a straight ball and a diagonal run from the two 9s absolutely killed their back. They couldn't turn quick enough. And by the time we'd had one touch, the goalkeeper's trying to smother the ball. It was just a very simple push into the goal. And as I say, 3 out of the 4 goals came from that. So the other thing we had to consider is, as well as the, and that's that picture there, the other thing we had to consider as well in transition was the fact that they would supply very, very quickly into their forwards, almost very, very direct. So we had to make sure that our line depth and distance of our back 4 consistently was really, really important. What we didn't want to do is do all the work of trying to work the ball into consistently into these areas, whilst they, we'd push fullbacks forwards. All of a sudden we're going gun-ho. We had to be conservative and be careful around their defence to attack transitions, because they got these 3 very, very quick forwards, particularly their 9 who was robust, and would try and pin up and play up against our back line. It was really, really important that we considered the line depth and distance of our back 4. What we did was we tried to push on the ball side 1 fullback up, so at least we had a 3+1 in defensive stability across the back, and being able to deal with their transition. But what we didn't also want to do is drop completely off, and then get the ball in front and face up, and then try and get our defensive line turned by playing through the 7-11. So it was really important that we kept at least a 3+1, sometimes a 4 in our back in stability. The other thing we did was try and stop their attacks, and this is where the 2 9s really, really helped us, because every time the keeper would get the ball, or every time in transition that they got the ball from us in counter pressure at their back line, what they would do is they would consistently try and play to the fullbacks, and the fullbacks would then either try and play direct into the 9 or try and play into the 7-11. So what we did was try and stop them starting, because we got 2 9s that were playing in the spaces between the central defenders and the fullbacks. It meant we could get really, really quick counter pressure, and because our forwards are really quick, we could get quick counter pressure that stopped them starting. And the general principle was cut off the line and force them inside. And what we would then do is block off and screen into the 9, so stop their ball going into the 9, and that completely stopped a lot of their sort of game plan stuff of trying to play wide, trying to play central. What they ended up by doing was setting the ball back to the keeper, and the keeper would just send it long. But we aerially across the back line were fairly dominant. So what we do is get the first contact to make sure we got the diamond tight in midfield to pick up the second contacts and restart the attacks again. So actually the 2 forwards are almost with the diamond in midfield, which we'd never played all season. And it's just a variation on what players experience in the women's pathway. So under 15s, under 14s, they consistently play 4-4-2. So that might be flat, it might be a diamond. So they've experienced playing with 2 forwards and 4 in midfield before. It's just that we played it slightly narrower this time. And then, as they move into the 16, 17s, they'll link having played the 4-4-2 to that. So they can still play 4-4-2, but they'll experience then a 4-3-3, be it a single pivot in midfield or a double pivot in midfield. So they've experienced playing different sort of formations before. It's just then that the tactics and strategies might be completely new, but importantly, with the lanes, with the principles of the blueprint or the DNA, all those things are consistent. So it's little variations on a theme for them as they play through.
Okay, John, link to that then, and this is probably a question for both of you to come at eventually. And again, I do apologise for my internet being very, very poor this morning. We've talked a lot about creating the attack in that central area. How often do you expect the centre-backs to step in? That's the first question, and overloading midfield by that way. And secondly, if they do step in, John, you just talked about always having 3+1 and having a +1 number at the back to stop their break. Do you rotate someone into that area, or are you quite happy going 1v1 at the back? Because I think a trend at the moment is to say, look, the centre-backs need to be good in 1v1 situations, so why would we not start to push players into midfield? What are your thoughts on that, going to Rob first?
I think both points, Levo. Yeah, centre-back step in. I'm doing a part of a project at the moment on creating the attack, and something that's really highlighted. Been watching through all the age groups on the pathway there. That is, the centre backs at the right times can step in and almost entice a player to come out, almost like we showed where that jumping 8 came out before. It might bring space to be able to play through, like you said,
yes,
overload that midfield. As long as he's doing it for the right reasons. I remember being told when I was a younger player, go on, step in. I used to step in at speed, and all of a sudden then as a centre-back, then it all closes around you and then you start panicking. So I think there's the way, you do it and you're doing it for the right reasons. So if you do have that time on the ball, we want to try and bring the opposition onto us to be able to play through them or around them. Definitely. So yeah, all over that. And then what was the second one again, Levo?
Stepped in. Are you happy going even numbers at the back in development?
Yeah, of course. So I think there's a lot of teams doing it at the moment, isn't there? That's in and out of possession. I think it depends on the players and if they're comfortable with it and the profile of the players. I also think it's got to suit you as a team, and then you probably got to think about, John, they're talking about an important game where it's kind of, for the players' development, it's about winning as well. And so you got to look at that risk and reward. But I know Liverpool are going to look like they're going to, win the Premier League this year, and you consistently see that the best team this season anyway doing it, don't you? So I think it depends on the players. I think though, if we're talking about development and developing players, and then coaches and managers might want in the future their players to be able to do it, we got to put them in those situations where they experience it. Because if they're a senior player and they haven't done it, then they might not play.
Yeah, spot on. John, over to you. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, similar to Rob, really. I think it's important that we develop players that are multifaceted, that can do all of those things. Central defenders that play in chaos is really important, particularly as you play against the top nations. They're quick in transition, they're quick to counter pressure, they're organised, competent, technically, tactically, physically. So it's really important that we don't fear that. So absolutely, we would have central defenders that will step in and overload midfield areas. It's really important because what teams are noticing, particularly as we want to build through the back and the attack, is that they start to put us under a bit of pressure. So if all of a sudden all our midfield are locked off, or they track and move at our movements, we've got to find different ways of getting the ball out. So having central defenders that can do that is really important. Having players that rotate into position when central defenders are stepping in, I think it depends on the tariff of the game, the opponent you're playing with. I think there's always that case of why you would do that. Having central defenders that are competent playing 1v1 is important. So 99% of the time, we'd be comfortable in leaving 1v1 at the back. But there's always that occasion. So I remember playing Nigeria in the World Cup in Jordan. Nigeria athletically were incredible. So if we have a central defender that steps in, they're quick to press. All of a sudden, we get caught out with that. And in a World Cup game, that can be quite a consequence for us. So in that game, we did rotate a number 4 in when that happened. And the reason that we did it wasn't just because we were worried about Nigeria. It's actually because Nigeria almost went player for player and followed our players around the pitch. So what we thought was if their 10 would sit on our number 4, wherever the 4 went, they went. So what we did was we rotated in our number 4. Their 10 went with them. And actually all it ended up by doing was creating an overload for us positively in their midfield, because the 10 was following our 4. So as we moved our 4 out of the space, it actually enabled our central defender to almost take the place of the 4 and completely overload their midfield. And it would end up taking one of their midfielders completely out of the game. So it was more of a tactical thing than a worrying too much about the security, but just making sure that in transition, because they're very quick and very athletic and got a lot of players forward early, we've just got a little bit of stability as and when we
Okay,
as and
so
when
just
we
to
needed
pull
it.
us together then.
And ironically, 0-0, I've never really troubled.
Okay, can you hear me?
Sorry,
Rob, can you hear us yet?
Yeah, sorry, go on.
Just to pull us together and tie the presentation together, we've shown the principles of play. We've given examples. We've given you case studies of tactics and strategies around individual games from both the male and female game. If you were to say, I want you to come up with three qualities. If this is the way you want the players to play, and we're developing the players as coaches in the game, what would be the three attributes that you would be looking for before selecting these players to come and play in this way? What would the three attributes be to try and round it up for the coaches? What would they be? We'll go to Rob first.
It's a good one, Levo, because there's lots of qualities you want them to be able to have. They've got to be intelligent, because they've got to be able to find those spaces when we're talking about, especially against an Iceland team that might be stubborn. We've got to be able to see what's going on. We've got to be able to see what's going on. So intelligence. They've got to be comfortable in possession and brave in possession as well, because we're gonna have to take risks at the right time, speed the game up at the right time. So I'd say intelligence, bravery, and then you're gonna have to, because we're talking about England now and we're talking at a really high level, you've got to have that quality. So you've got to have that standout quality now, whether you're a centre back that we talked about now, stepping in, enticing the opposition out at the right times to be able to play through, around or over, or if you're that number 10 that we showed before that's receiving in those pockets and able to play in tight spaces. So that quality and that being able to handle the ball is really, really important as well.
Brilliant. Okay, so there's three there. What would you say, John?
I think I agree with Rob in that they have to have a degree of technical competency that they can execute under tactical duress. So it's really important they can receive on the move, pass on the move, defend on the move. It's really important that they can do that. That's kind of a given. The three for us would be they have to be disciplined in what we're asking them to do and stay with it. There's a plan in place for a reason. It's really important that whilst there might be nuances and we can tweak and we can change within a game, but there's a plan in place for a reason. So the discipline of them understanding and sticking to their roles is important. They have to be positionally adaptable. So whereas we're asking fullbacks that might play in lanes 2 and 4, so they play inside. We might ask forwards that play inverted, left side, right side. We might ask for 2 forwards that don't play through the centre. They play through the spaces between the fullbacks and the central defenders, like we did against Italy. So they have to be tactically and positionally flexible. We want to play to their strengths. Absolutely, that's really important. But they have to be flexible within that. And the final one, particularly in tournament football, they've got to have a mental toughness about them that, when like there, we need to win a game. So you have got to be, tough enough to be able to deal with the pressures of playing in tournament football against the very, very best opponents in the world. And if you want to go to finals, World Cups or into Euros, you've got to beat the best. So you have to be mentally tough enough to be able to cope under the stresses and the pressures of that environment. And that's part of their development in this environment. It's not just a technical tactical piece, it's almost a psychological piece as well, of them being together on the road for as many days as they are. I think we were 28 days in Jordan together. Gareth and the senior women were much longer in the World Cup when they went about 55 days on the road. So being able to cope with all that, being able to cope with all the pressures of what the games and the roller coaster and the ebb and flow of winning, losing, drawing games, bring pressures about themselves. So that's a really, really important thing in our environment.
Great. I want to thank Rob and John for their input to the presentation. We do apologise for the internet problems that we've had. Coaches, it's up to you now to go away, digest the information, and come back in a better position to help the players to develop to achieve their potential. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.